The first sign that something was wrong was not an explosion. It was the silence. High above the blue-green world catalogued as sultry, the observation vessel Ithral's Mercy drifted in low orbit. Its sensor arrays unfurled like metallic petals. Within its crystalline command chamber, Senior Archivist Thalan of the Valori Concord watched the planet rotate beneath him. Clouds swirled in slow spirals. Sunlight struck the oceans like molten glass. Continents glowed with scattered lights, billions of independent energy signatures. Chaotic, inefficient, but alive, primitive, disordered, dangerous in the way small creatures often were, unpredictable, noisy, emotionally unstable. Population density continues to rise, reported analyst Sirith, her tendrils flickering with mild concern. Technological capability pre-expansion military fragmentation across multiple governing bodies. Atmospheric contamination increasing. Thalan nodded, recording the data into the Concord's Grand Archive. Classification remains unchanged, he said calmly. Category 4, non-integrated industrial species, limited threat potential. A quiet pause followed. Then Sirith added, almost as an afterthought, they continue to transmit music. Thalon tilted his head. Music. Yes, thousands of frequencies, emotional pattern structures. Many are melancholic. Thalan watched the planet again. Strange species, these humans. They polluted their own atmosphere. They fought wars among themselves. They divided into nations, religions, ideologies. Their governance systems were inefficient. Their technological progress was uneven and chaotic. And yet, they filled their skies with satellites. They sent machines beyond their system. They broadcast art into the void. They built weapons powerful enough to scar their own world and then wrote poems about regret. The galaxy had noticed them, and the galaxy had dismissed them. For 3,000 cycles, the known galaxy had existed under a fragile equilibrium. The major powers, the Valori Concord, the Karnak Dominion, the Teth Ascendancy, and the Luminous Collective maintained peace through mutual deterrence and strict expansion protocols. No developing species was to be contacted prematurely. No system was to be annexed without full assessment. No emerging civilization was to be destabilized unless it posed a credible future threat. Earth did not. Not yet. The humans were centuries away from faster-than-light travel. Their energy systems were primitive. Their communication networks were insecure. Their political structure was fragmented. Their species, according to most assessments, would either unify slowly or destroy itself long before reaching the stars. They were not a priority, they were not a threat. They were a curiosity, until the Karnak Dominion arrived. The Karnak did not believe in patience. Where the Valori studied, the Karnak conquered. Their empire expanded through force, absorption, and strategic resource acquisition. Entire systems were evaluated not for cultural significance, but for industrial value. Sol was rich, water, heavy metals, biomass, a stable G-type star, a species too primitive to resist. From the bridge of the Ithral's Mercy, the first Karnak vessels appeared as distortions in space, gravity wells folding inward as 6 massive war carriers tore through localized slipspace. Sirith's tendrils froze. Unauthorized military presence detected. Thalan stood. Identify, confirmed, Karnak Dominion. Battle group designation, Iron Spear. The chamber darkened as the Concord vessel shifted to stealth observation mode. Below them, Earth continued its rotation. Unaware, humans went to work. Children went to school. Traffic moved. Cities breathed. No alarms, no defenses, no understanding. Inside the lead Karnak carrier, Warlord Grathvek studied the holographic projection of Earth. The Karnak were massive beings, armored exoskeletons, heavy gravity, musculature, forward-leaning predatory posture. Their species evolved on a high-gravity death world. Mercy was not part of their biological vocabulary. This is the species the Concord debates, Vek asked. Yes, Warlord replied as strategist. Technological level, minimal. Planetary defenses, negligible. No orbital military capability capable of resisting Dominion forces. Vek examined the data. Thousands of fragmented governments, independent militaries, uncoordinated response networks. No unified planetary command. They are divided, he said. Yes, they war among themselves constantly. Vec gave a low, satisfied rumble. Then they understand conquest. The strategist hesitated. Concord law prohibits interference. Vec turned slowly. Concord law protects the weak. He leaned closer to the projection. The Dominion feeds on the weak. The Karnak did not open diplomatic channels. They did not transmit greetings. They did not issue warnings. Instead, 3 massive orbital platforms deployed above Earth's atmosphere. Each one carried a single weapon, atmospheric suppression fields. Within minutes, the effects began. Satellite networks failed. Global communications flickered. Navigation systems collapsed. Power grids destabilized. Across Earth, confusion spread. Aircraft diverted. Cities went dark. Emergency broadcasts flooded every frequency. No one understood what was happening. From orbit, Thalin watched in horror. "This is a violation of expansion protocol," Cirith whispered. "Yes," Thalin said quietly. "And the Concord will respond." Thalin did not answer, because the Concord always responded slowly, and the Karnak never waited. After 12 hours of planetary disruption, the Karnak transmitted a single global signal. Every remaining functioning screen on Earth televisions, phones, military displays, emergency systems switched simultaneously. The image was simple: a towering alien form, armored, immovable. Behind it, the dark silhouette of a warfleet. The translation algorithm struggled, then stabilized. The voice was deep, cold, absolute. "Species of Sol-3. This system now falls under the authority of the Karnak Dominion. All military resistance will cease immediately. All governing bodies will surrender planetary control within 1 standard rotation. Failure to comply will result in atmospheric sterilization of major population." Centers. The message ended. No negotiation, no diplomacy, no misunderstanding. Humanity had just been invaded. Across dozens of observation networks, the reaction was the same: concern but not fear. The Valori filed emergency reports. The Luminous Collective issued formal protest signals. The Teth Ascendancy began legal arbitration procedures. The Karnak began resource assessment, because this was not unusual. Primitive species were absorbed all the time. Most collapsed within hours. Some resisted briefly, none survived. From orbit, Thalin studied Earth's response. Military aircraft scrambled blindly. Missiles launched and failed to reach orbit. Governments broadcast emergency declarations. Cities panicked. Markets crashed. Social networks erupted in fear, anger, denial, and then something unexpected happened. The humans did not surrender. 6 hours after the Karnak ultimatum, a transmission broke through the suppression field. It was weak, fragmented, but it was global. A human voice, female. .com. "This is Secretary General Amina Rowe of the United Earth Emergency Council." Behind her stood representatives from dozens of nations, some enemies only days before. "We acknowledge the presence of an extraterrestrial force in orbit. We do not recognize their authority. We will not surrender our world." Thalin leaned forward. Cirith whispered, "They cannot possibly resist." Below, Rowe continued. "To the Karnak Dominion." Her voice hardened. "Earth is not a resource. It is our home. We do not surrender homes." There was a brief pause. Then she added, "If you intend to destroy us." Her eyes did not waver. "You should understand something about humanity." The transmission cut. The Karnak did not respond, because from their perspective there was nothing to discuss. Warlord Vec issued the order. Demonstration strike. A single orbital platform began charging. Target: uninhabited oceanic region. Purpose: display planetary-scale destructive capability. Time to impact: 2 hours, across Earth. Panic surged. Evacuation orders. Military mobilization. Emergency bunkers opened. Religious gatherings filled. Families held each other. Governments prepared for extinction. From orbit, Thalin watched the energy spike building above the atmosphere. "This will end them," Cirith whispered. "Yes," Thalin said. But something troubled him, because Earth's military networks were not collapsing. They were reorganizing. Data traffic was increasing. Encrypted channels were activating. Subsurface facilities were powering up. Hidden systems were coming online. Systems that had never been detected before. Cirith noticed it too. Archivist Thalon stared at the growing web of signals. "Why are there underground networks activating?" she asked. Thalon did not answer. Because at that exact moment, every human military communication channel on the planet went dark. Not destroyed, not jammed, disconnected, isolated. Then, from somewhere deep beneath Earth's surface, a signal left the planet, not toward the Karnak, not toward their own satellites, but outward, beyond the system, into deep space. Fallon's voice dropped to a whisper. What did they just activate? And far beyond Sol, something answered. About beyond the orbit of the outer planets, something had just awakened. Senior Archivist Thalon saw it first as a thin line of energy leaving Earth, narrow, precise, and far too controlled for a species that had only just reached its own moon. The human signal wasn't a distress call. It wasn't a broadcast. It was deliberate. "It's not standard radio," Analyst Cirith murmured, her tendrils tightening as layers of data unfolded across her display. "There's encoding inside encoding, compression patterns I don't recognize." Thalon leaned closer. "A military transmission." Cirith hesitated. "No," she said quietly. "It looks like a key." The signal did not spread like light. It moved differently, slipping through space as if guided, carried by a field-coupled propagation method the Valori Concord considered restricted technology. And then the signal touched something far beyond the helium. At the edge of the Sol system, the darkness shimmered once like an eye-opening. Cirith's tendrils froze. "That's not a ship's signature." Thalon stared at the anomaly, a slow unease settling in his chest. "Then what is it?" he asked. Cirith didn't look away from the data. "It's a lock," she whispered. "An Earth just knocked." Thalon should not have been surprised. He had spent 2 centuries in service to the Concord's Grand Archive, cataloging the rise and fall of species across the spiral arm. He knew how often primitive worlds hid anomalies, artifacts, buried gates, evidence of precursor influence. The galaxy was not young. Every system had been touched by something, at some time. But Earth had always been clean. No precursor ruins on its moon. No alien megastructures in its asteroid belt. No unnatural isotopic scars in its crust. A textbook developing world, a perfect example of natural evolution. And yet Thalon pulled up the earliest files the Concord possessed on Sol 3, records older than most living Valori. They began with a single note, "Barred first survey." Inconclusive. The line beneath it was stranger. "Recommendation. Observe. Do not contact. Do not provoke." Thalon's spines prickled. He scrolled further, into encrypted addenda. The addenda were marked with a classification Thalon had seen only a handful of times in his long service. Black Mirror Protocol. His breath caught. Black Mirror Protocol was not for dangerous species. It was not for war threats or plagues or runaway machines. It was for worlds that were watched by something else. Worlds that belonged to no empire, but were still somehow claimed. Thalon's mind raced. "Cirith," he said carefully, "pull the hidden annotations, the ones locked behind archivist year access." Cirith hesitated. "You have authority, but do it." The chamber's crystal walls dimmed as the ship's core decrypted ancient layers. Symbols unfolded like old wounds opening. The archive's voice, a neutral, emotionless AI, spoke. Sol 3 anomalous designation detected. Precursor interaction probability. External guardianship probability non-zero. Thalon felt cold. External guardianship. Cirith whispered. "Guardianship by whom?" The AI responded. "Designation unknown. Hypothesis label. The silent choir." Thalon's gaze snapped to Cirith. He could see fear in the way her tendrils trembled. The silent choir, a legend among archivists, half myth, half warning, an unconfirmed network of ancient watchers who intervened only when the galaxy threatened certain worlds. Worlds that, for reasons unknown, were never meant to be consumed. Most scholars dismissed it as superstition, the desperate storytelling of civilizations afraid to admit there were powers beyond treaty. But treaties did not matter in the face of something older than empires. And now, above Earth, the Karnak Dominion had ignored every law of restraint. It had stepped on a line it did not know existed. Warlord Graf. Vec did not read archives. He did not care for myths. He cared for results above Earth. His orbital platform continued to charge. The energy field around it thickened, shimmering like heat haze. Below, the target zone in the ocean was marked. An empty stretch of water chosen to send a message. Without wasting biomass, the Dominion's strategists anticipated the planet's final collapse. "All human resistance networks have gone dark," reported the strategist. "Their global channels are silent." Vec's mandibles flexed in satisfaction. "They are afraid." The strategist hesitated. "Or coordinating," Vec snorted. "A species without unified command cannot coordinate faster than a Dominion strike. They will panic, fracture, and beg." He watched Earth with predatory amusement. Storm systems rolled across continents, hiding cities beneath cloud. The world looked peaceful from orbit, like a jewel in a black sea. Jewels were meant to be taken. A junior sensor officer spoke nervously. "Warlord, We detect a subspace fluctuation at the heliopause. Vec barely turned his head. A ship, no signature, it's stationary, like an object awakening. The strategist frowned. Could be Concord interference. Vec's voice was dismissive. The Concord would protest. They would posture. They would call councils. They would not risk combat for a Category 4 world. He leaned forward. Fire the demonstration strike. While alien fleets argued over their right to dominate, humanity moved beneath its own soil. Phelan could not hear human voices directly. The Karnak suppression field still disrupted the planet's upper atmosphere, but he could see the patterns of energy in motion. Deep underground, heat signatures shifted. Vast cavities previously mapped as natural lit with electrical activity. These chambers weren't there before, Sirith said. Voice taught. Thal N compared old scans and new ones, and felt his stomach twist. The chambers had always been there, but they had been masked, not with primitive camouflage, not with simple geological misdirection, with something deliberate, something that bent scanning waves away like light around a black crystal. Thalan's mouth went dry. Who built those? Sirith's tendrils rippled in helplessness. Humans couldn't, not at their level. Then a new signal appeared, not traveling outward this time, but inward, an exchange between Earth's hidden facilities and the object at the heliopause, the lock. The door, whatever it was. Earth had just opened it, lying to it. Thaland felt a pulse of dread, not fear of humans, fear of what humans had access to at the edge of Sol's domain, far beyond the orbits of the outer gas giants. The shimmer grew stronger. It was not a ship, it was not a station, it did not broadcast, it simply shifted the fabric of space around it, like a stone pressing into water. The Ithral's Mercy's sensors struggled to interpret it. The object had no obvious shape, its geometry refused to settle into a stable form. At one moment it looked like a ring, at another, like a folded lattice, at another like nothing at all, only a distortion in the cosmic background. Sirith's voice trembled. It's not in real space properly. It's anchored between layers. Thalon whispered. A gate? Not exactly. Gates connect places. This feels like a listening post, or a warning system. Thalen could not stop staring at the impossible geometry. He had spent his life cataloging the galaxy's wonders. But this was different. This was not merely advanced technology. This was otherness, the sense of a design philosophy that did not share the assumptions of modern species. And Earth had the key. Below. The Karnak platform's charge reached its final stage. A spear of light began to form. The demonstration weapon fired. From orbit, a column of condensed energy fell toward the ocean. It did not burn like fire. It collapsed air into plasma, ionizing the atmosphere in a widening cylinder. It was the kind of weapon that made a planet feel small. It struck, the ocean erupted. A bright wound opened in the CCM, and shockwaves rolling outward in a ring that swallowed cloudbanks. A wall of water rose toward the sky, then collapsed in roaring fury. The planet shuddered, a seismic ripple traveling through its crust, even from orbit. The violence was breathtaking. The Karnak bridge, filled with satisfied clicks and rumbles. Vek watched the devastation like an artist admiring a finished carving. Now they understand, he said, but the humans still did not surrender. New phenomenon occurred. Above Earth's atmosphere, the air shimmered, not from heat, but from geometry, but for a heartbeat. Thalan thought his sensors were malfunctioning. Then he realized the planet's upper atmosphere was being mapped, like invisible hands tracing lines across the sky. Patterns unfolded, not random, not natural. A lattice of faint, glowing nodes formed around the world, connecting in arcs that resembled the structure of a nervous system. Sirith's voice was barely audible. They're building a field. Thalan's heart pounded. With what power source? Sirith's tendrils curled inward. Not with power, with permission. Then the lock at the heliopause pulsed, once, twice, and in the darkness beyond, something shifted as if a colossal throat had opened. A soundless wave rippled through the system. It passed through ships, planets, dust, and radiation alike without disturbing them physically. Yet every sensor screamed. The Karnak fleet's navigation crystals flickered. Their suppression fields stuttered. Their orbital platform's weapon system paused. Not broken, not destroyed, paused, like a hand had been gently placed on it on the Karnak bridge. Confusion spread. Warlord, our system's vexed eyes narrowed. Explain. The strategist's voice shook. A foreign field is interacting with our control networks. It's rewriting priority protocols. Vex slammed a clawed fist into the console. By what authority? No one answered. Because authority was a political concept. This was something else. The field did not argue, it simply was. Then, across every frequency, across every spectrum, a message appeared, not just on Karnak systems, but on Valori observation displays, on distant relay buoys, even on dormant probes that had not been active in centuries. The message was not translated. It did not need translation. It carried meaning, like gravity carries mass. Three symbols. Simple. Ancient. The Concord archive recognized them instantly, and Thalan felt his blood turn to ice. The symbols were the same ones that marked Black Mirror worlds, the same ones that appeared in dead ruins. where entire fleets had vanished without debris. Same ones associated with the silent choir, Sirith whispered. It's real. Thalan's voice was hoarse. Yes, then, for the first time since the Karnak arrived, Earth sent a transmission again. But this one did not come from the Secretary-General. It came from somewhere deeper, somewhere older. A human voice spoke, male, weary, and quiet, as if addressing not an enemy, but an inevitability. To any who hear this, the voice said, steady as stone, we invoke the Covenant of Ash. Thalan's eyes widened. The Covenant of Ash was not in any treaty. It was not in any Karnak conquest record. It was a phrase that did not belong to a developing world. The voice continued. We were told to sleep. We were told to forget. We were told we were not ready. A pause, but you came anyway. The voice sharpened. So now you will learn why our ancestors buried the fire. On the Karnak bridge, Warlord Vec leaned forward, anger rising. Who speaks? He demanded, broadcasting his own voice outward in Dominion code. Human, identify yourself. The human voice answered, calm and terrifyingly direct. I am not your concern. We are standing in the nursery of a weapon. Thalan. We felt the words settle into the chamber like falling ash. A nursery of a weapon. Sirith's tendrils trembled so violently they struck the console. Thalon, that implies. Yes, Thalan whispered. It implies Earth was never just a world. He stared down at the planet, seeing it now not as a primitive sphere of chaotic lights, but as a sealed vault. A cradle, a containment. Something had been placed there long ago, and humanity, fragile, violent, compassionate, contradictory humanity, had grown around it like moss around a hidden blade. The Karnak did not understand. Understanding was not part of their conquest doctrine. Vex snarled. All platforms, re-engage suppression. Prepare sterilization strikes on their capitals. The strategist's eyes were wide with fear. Warlord, our weapons are not responding. It's as if what? As if something outranks us. Vex's mandibles flared. Nothing outranks the Dominion. But the universe disagreed. The shimmering lock unfolded. Not opening like a door, opening like an eye. And within that impossible geometry, Thalan glimpsed a shape that made his breath stop. A fleet. Not Karnak. Not Valori. Not any modern design. It was vast, silent, and motionless, like statues carved from darkness. No engine flare. No chatter. No heat signature. Only presence. Waiting. Watching. And then, impossibly, a signal emerged from that ancient fleet, not directed at the Karnak, not directed at the Concord, directed at Earth, a single, simple pulse. As if asking, are you awake? Down on the planet, the lattice around the atmosphere brightened. Deep underground, hidden chambers flared with power levels that should have cracked continents. And for the first time, Thalan saw something else, a human city, just one going dark in a way that was not fear-driven but intentional. Lights extinguishing in a pattern, grids aligning, entire populations moving with practiced precision into shelters that had clearly been built for this. They humans were not panicking, they were executing a plan older than any of them. Sirith's voice was barely a breath. They prepared for an invasion. Thalan stared at Earth, horror and awe twisting together. No, he said softly. They prepared for this. On the Karnak bridge, Vec roared, all ships, full combat readiness. Identify that fleet at the system edge. No answer came from the ancient shapes. Instead, Earth's atmosphere lattice pulsed once like a heartbeat, and the human voice returned, quieter now, almost regretful. We begged the galaxy to leave us alone. A pause, heavy with something like sorrow. Now we have to remind you why. For a long moment, nothing moved. Not the Karnak fleet, not the ancient shapes beyond the heliopause, not even the shifting lattice, now encasing Earth's atmosphere like a faint, glowing shell. Across the observation deck of the Ithral's Mercy, the silence carried a weight that Thalan had only felt once before, during the archival reconstruction of the Karo's extinction, when 3 civilizations had vanished in a single hour, and no one could explain how. Now he felt that same quiet gravity settling over the soul. System status, he said softly. Tendrils hovered over the console, trembling. The atmospheric lattice is stabilizing. Energy input is coming from multiple subterranean sources. Estimated output increasing. How much increasing? Sirith hesitated. Then she displayed the figure. Thalan stared. The energy levels being generated by Earth's hidden infrastructure exceeded the entire planetary output previously recorded for the species, and it was still climbing. This is impossible, Sirith whispered. Their global grid couldn't support this. Thalan nodded slowly. It isn't their grid. He looked again toward the distant ancient fleet. Something is feeding them. Warlord Grathvek did not believe in impossible. Impossible was a word used by species that lost wars. On the Dominion flagship Iron Crown, alarms pulsed across the command chamber. Weapon systems refused priority commands. Suppression fields fluctuated unpredictably. Navigation arrays reported gravitational interference where none should exist. Vex strategists spoke rapidly. Unknown external control field continues to override system hierarchies. Our targeting solutions are degrading. Override the override, Vec growled. We are attempting manual control. Attempt faster. Across the tactical display, Earth now glowed faintly, a sphere wrapped in geometric lines that shifted and reconfigured like a living network. The strategist swallowed. That structure is not defensive in a conventional sense. It's computing, Vec turned. Explain. It's processing planetary scale data in real time. Atmospheric conditions, orbital vectors, electromagnetic interference. It's turning the entire upper atmosphere into a sensor and control layer. Vec's mandibles flexed. They are using their planet as a war machine. Yes, Warlord. Vec leaned forward slowly. Then we break the machine. He slammed his claw down. All ships. Independent fire authority. Target subsurface energy sources. Maximum yield if their centralized systems were compromised. Then the solution was simple. Destroy everything. From orbit, the Karnak fleet opened fire. 32 heavy plasma lances descended toward Earth, each capable of vaporizing a city. They targeted the largest energy signatures, the hidden facilities buried beneath mountain ranges, deserts, and ancient shield cratons on the Ithrel's mercy. Sirith gasped. They're going for the underground network. Thalon watched, unable to look away if the humans lost those facilities. Whatever they were attempting would collapse if they survived. The first lance reached the atmosphere and vanished, not deflected, not absorbed. It simply ceased to exist, as if the beam had entered a region where its energy state was no longer permitted. The second lance fragmented into harmless light. The third curved, impossibly, bending away from its target and dispersing into the upper clouds on the Karnak bridge. Confusion turned to shock. Our weapons are degrading mid-flight. Field interaction, the strategist guessed. No, it's not resistance, another officer said, voice shaking. The energy is being reclassified, Vec snarled. Energy cannot be reclassified. But on the display, Earth's atmospheric lattice shifted again, nodes brightening, lines reconfiguring like a neural network adapting to new input. Thalon whispered, it's not blocking the attacks. Sirith's eyes widened. It's rewriting physics locally. For nearly 20 minutes, the Karnak continued firing. Nothing reached the ground, not a single strike. Then Earth responded, not with a weapon. With a message. Every open frequency across the system activated simultaneously, not the deep ancient voice from before, but the Secretary General again. Amina Rowe appeared on Karnak displays, on Vialori observation screens, even on the silent relic sensors near the heliopause. She looked exhausted, but her eyes were steady. This is a final notice to the Karnak Dominion, she said. Her voice carried no fear. You are engaging in hostile military action against a protected world. The strategists on Vexbridge laughed harshly. Protected by whom? As if answering him, the distant ancient fleet pulsed once a silent acknowledgement. Rowe continued. We did not want to activate the Covenant. We did not want this system to become visible. Her expression hardened. But you fired first. She leaned slightly closer to the camera. You still have time to leave. There was a long pause. Then, quietly, because once we begin escalation, we will not be able to stop it quickly. The transmission ended on the Iron Crown. Warlord Vex stared at the fading image. Then he laughed, a deep, rolling sound of predatory amusement. A developing species threatens the Dominion, he said. The strategist shifted uneasily. Warlord, their capabilities are outside predicted parameters. All the more reason to demonstrate supremacy. He straightened to his full height. If we retreat now, every lesser species will believe defiance works. His gaze hardened. We do not retreat from primitives. He issued the order. Deploy planetary kinetic strike pattern, full fleet. The strategist's voice dropped. Those weapons are designed for planetary cracking. Then they will learn what defiance costs. Across the spiral arm, long-range monitoring stations began flagging. Anomalies. Energy signatures from Sol were climbing beyond normal planetary thresholds. The Luminous Collective dispatched inquiry. Drones. The Tith Ascendancy opened emergency arbitration channels. The Valori Concord convened an emergency council. But information moved slowly. Between stars, decisions moved even slower, and the Karnak were already committed. From the Dominion fleet, massive kinetic bodies detached, tungsten cores, the size of small ships, accelerated to relativistic velocity. Planet-crackers. Weapons designed to bypass shields and defenses through sheer momentum. On the Ithral's mercy, Sirith's voice broke. If those reach the surface, they won't, Thalon said automatically. But this time, he wasn't sure, because momentum was harder to rewrite than energy. The first penetrator entered Earth's upper atmosphere. The lattice flared, brighter than before. Nodes shifted, patterns realigned. For a moment, nothing happened. Then space itself seemed to thicken around the falling object. Its trajectory slowed. Not by drag. By time. Thalon leaned forward. It's inside a temporal gradient. The penetrator continued downward, Slower. Then it stopped, hung motionless in the sky, glowing from atmospheric friction. 32 more followed. Within minutes, the sky above Earth held a constellation of frozen weapons, falling suns trapped in amber. Sirith whispered. They just paused relativistic objects. Thalen exhaled slowly. This isn't a defense system. What is it? He didn't look away from the impossible display. It's environmental authority. On the Karnak bridge, silence had replaced confidence. Our penetrators are stationary, the strategist reported. Vec demanded local space-time modulation. We cannot compensate. For the first time, uncertainty touched the warlord's posture. Then alarms screamed. Unknown energy surged from planetary surface. On every display, one of Earth's major underground facilities located beneath the desert region began venting light, not upward, outward. A flat wave of distortion spread across the terrain, expanding in a perfect circle. Vec's strategist stared. That's not a weapon. Then what is it? A boundary. The expanding wave passed through cities, mountains, and oceans without causing visible damage when it reached orbit. The Dominion ships felt it. Not as force. Resistance navigation systems reported increased. Inertia, weapon charging times doubled. Sensor resolution degraded. The strategist's voice was tight. It's increasing environmental hostility toward unauthorized systems. Vec's eyes narrowed. Authorized by whom? No one answered. Because everyone on the bridge understood the implication. Not authorized by humans. Authorized by whatever had built the Covenant, on the Ithrel's mercy. Thalen replayed the data again and again. Energy manipulation, temporal control, priority-based, environmental physics. Ancient external infrastructure, and humans. Operating it. Not perfectly, not efficiently, but confidently. He finally spoke the thought he had been avoiding. They didn't build this. Sirith nodded. Slowly. No. Thalen's voice dropped to a whisper. They inherited it. He stared at Earth. At some point in their past, someone decided humanity would be the custodians of something the rest of the galaxy was not allowed to have. Sirith swallowed, and now the Karnak are forcing them to use it. On the Dominion flagship, the strategist approached Vec carefully. Warlord, our operational efficiency has dropped by 40%. If environmental hostility continues to increase. Vec cut him off. Then we end this quickly. He turned to the fleet channel. All ships, core overdrive. Prepare system-wide suppression bursts. We will disable whatever network they are using. The strategist hesitated. The level of energy discharge could destabilize local space. Vec's answer was cold. Then, the humans will learn what escalation truly means. Across the fleet, reactors surged. Energy levels spiked. On Earth, deep beneath the surface, alarms began to sound in hidden chambers built generations ago. For a day no one believed would come, and for the first time since the invasion began, the ancient fleet at the heliopause moved, just slightly, like statues remembering they were alive. On the Ithrel's mercy, Sirith whispered. They're responding. Thalen nodded slowly, dread settling into his bones. No, he said, they're watching to see what humanity chooses next, because the Karnak were about to unleash enough power to wound a star, and Earth's covenant of ash had just crossed from defense into retaliation territory. In the long history of the Valori Concord, there existed a phrase used only in the most extreme archival classifications: system-level instability. Event. It described moments when the balance of power, physics, and political reality collapsed all at once, when wars stopped being conflicts between civilizations and became disasters for entire regions of space. Senior Archivist Thalen watched the Sol system cross that threshold. Across the Karnak fleet, reactors pushed beyond safe limits. Containment fields brightened, heat plumes flared into vacuum. Energy reserves normally conserved for fleet-scale engagements were redirected into a single unified discharge. Their objective was simple: if Earth's strange lattice relied on distributed environmental control, then the Dominion would overwhelm the system by brute force, flood local space with enough raw energy to destabilize whatever mechanism was interfering. On the command deck of the Iron Crown, Warlord Grathvek stood, immovable as status reports flooded in. Reactors at 112% core integrity, holding suppression burst alignment in progress. The strategist spoke carefully. Warlord, the energy release will create a localized gravitational shear. Our own maneuverability will be compromised for several minutes. Vec did not hesitate. Acceptable. His mandibles tightened. Primitive species rely on clever defenses. He leaned toward the tactical display, eyes fixed on Earth's glowing lattice. We rely on overwhelming reality, far below the surface of Earth, inside structures that officially did not exist. Human operators worked in near silence. These facilities were older than most governments, older than most political alliances. Some had been built in secrecy during the Cold War. Others expanded quietly over decades, disguised as geological research stations, energy experiments, or military bunkers. But the deepest chambers were older still, not ancient in construction, ancient in purpose. In one such facility, buried beneath kilometers of rock, Director Elias Navarro stood before a wall of holographic projections showing the Karnak fleet's rising energy curve. A young officer whispered, "They're going to spike the system." Navarro nodded. Estimated yield, equivalent to simultaneous detonation of 40 Stellar-class weapons. A long pause. Then the officer asked the question no one wanted to ask. Can the lattice hold? Navarro looked at another display that did not show the Karnak. It showed the HELIOPAUSE and the silent fleet waiting there. It's not about whether it holds, Navarro said quietly. It's about whether they decide to help. The officer swallowed, and if they don't, Navarro's voice was calm. Then we execute phase Ember. The room grew colder. Everyone in that chamber knew what phase Ember meant. It meant humanity would stop trying to survive the war, start trying to end it permanently. In orbit, the Karnak fleet fired. It was not a beam, not a projectile. It was a spherical release of raw energy, an expanding shell of gravitational distortion, electromagnetic chaos, and high-energy particle saturation, a localized storm designed to overwhelm any structured field. On the Ethereal's mercy, alarms screamed system-wide instability spike. The expanding wave raced toward Earth for a moment. The atmospheric lattice resisted. Nodes flared white, patterns strained, several connections snapped like overstressed filaments. Sirith gasped. "They're breaking it." Thalen watched as the glowing network flickered, sections collapsing under the pressure. If the lattice failed now, the burst hit Earth's upper atmosphere. For one terrible second the sky burned at the heel of the ancient fleet moved. Not quickly, not dramatically. One of the immense silent structures shifted, positioned by a fraction of a degree. Then it did something no modern technology should have been capable of. It declared authority across the Sol system. A field propagated not energy, not radiation, but a restructuring of priority within the local laws of interaction. The Karnak burst slowed, not stopped. Slowed like a wave entering thick liquid. By the time it reached Earth's atmosphere, its destructive potential had dropped by 87%. The remaining energy struck the weakened lattice. Several nodes failed, but the system held. On the surface, storms erupted. Power grids flickered. Satellites died, but the planet survived. Sirith exhaled shakily, intervened. Thalen nodded slowly yes. His eyes were fixed on the ancient fleet. They didn't defend Earth. They enforced a limit. Across the Dominion fleet, shock rippled through command channels. Our burst effectiveness reduced mid-propagation. External field interference detected. Source, system boundary. On the Iron Crown, the strategist's voice was tight with fear. "Warlord, something just overruled our energy authority." Vex's posture stiffened. "No species outranks the Dominion." "This isn't a species," the strategist whispered. Before Vex could respond, a new signal appeared. "Not human. Not Concord. ODI." The translation system struggled, then settled into something simple and terrible. Escalation threshold reached. Pause. Then custodial species authorized defensive autonomy. On Earth, deep underground, Director Navarro received the same message. He closed his eyes. "They gave us clearance," he whispered. The young officer looked pale. "For what?" Navarro opened his eyes. "For everything." Across Earth, hidden infrastructure shifted from defensive configuration to offensive alignment. The atmospheric lattice reconfigured nodes, condensed. Patterns, simplified. Energy that had been distributed for planetary protection began flowing toward specific geographic coordinates. Tendrils shook violently. "They're concentrating power." Thalen's voice was tight. "On what targets?" The answer appeared seconds later. 32. Targeting solutions. Every one of them matched a Karnak warship. The attack did not look like a weapon. No beams, no missiles, no explosions. Instead, space around the first Karnak cruiser changed. Its inertial reference frame shifted by a fraction, then by more. Inside the ship, gravity fluctuated wildly. Structural stress alarms screamed as mass distribution calculations failed. Then, without warning, the ship experienced sudden, differential time flow between its forward and rear sections. The whole tore itself apart. Not from impact. From disagreement with reality. Across the Dominion fleet, 3 more ships experienced similar failures. One folded inward as its internal pressure gradients inverted. Another froze completely, trapped inside a localized temporal pocket. A third simply vanished, its quantum signature dispersed beyond sensor resolution. On the Ethereal's mercy, Sirith stared in horror. "They're not destroying the ships," Phalon finished the thought. "They're removing their permission to exist in stable space." On the Iron Crown, chaos replaced discipline. 4 ships lost. Cause unknown. No energy signatures. "Warlord, this is not a conventional attack." Vex's eyes burned with rage. "All ships disperse. Full maneuvering authority. Target planetary power nodes." But maneuvering had become difficult. The environmental hostility field was increasing. Thrusters produced less acceleration. Targeting solutions drifted. Weapon charge times stretched. The Sol system itself was turning against them. Earth transmitted again. This time, the speaker was Director Navarro. His face was lined with exhaustion and something heavier. Regret Karnak Dominion, he said quietly. You have crossed the escalation boundary. Behind him, the glow of underground reactors pulsed like a heartbeat. We are now operating under custodial authority. He paused. We are still limiting our response. The strategist on Vex Bridge whispered. That was limited. Navarro continued. You can still leave the system. A long silence, then softly, if you stay, the next phase will not be reversible. The transmission ended. The strategist turned to Vec. Warlord, we need to withdraw. Vec did not move. If we retreat, the Dominion's authority collapses. With respect, the strategist said, voice shaking. Our authority is already collapsing. Another report came in. Environmental hostility rising again. Reactor efficiency dropping. The strategist took a breath. Warlord, this system does not want us here. Vec's response was quiet, then deadly. Then we will break the system. He turned to the fleet channel. All remaining ships, prepare star impact protocol. Silence filled the bridge. The strategist went pale. Warlord, that's a stellar destabilization maneuver. Yes, if we trigger a flare large enough, the entire inner system will burn. Vec finished. His eyes were cold. If we cannot claim this world, he looked toward Earth. No one will. On the Ithral's mercy, Sirith's voice broke. They're targeting the sun. Thalon felt something inside him turn to ice. If the Karnak triggered a stellar event, even the Covenant might not be able to prevent catastrophic loss. He looked toward the heliopause. The ancient fleet had not moved again. They were still watching, still waiting. Sirith whispered. Why aren't they stopping this? Thalon understood. Because this is the test. Test of what? His voice was very quiet. Of how far humanity is willing to go. Deep underground. Alarms blared. Director Navarro stared at the new threat projection. Stellar destabilization in 12 minutes. The young officer spoke urgently. We don't have a defensive solution for a solar cascade. Navarro didn't answer immediately. He looked instead at a sealed console. On it was a label few people on Earth even knew existed. Phase ASH full. A UTH rider officer's voice trembled. So, if we activate that. Navarro nodded slowly. I know. Casualty projections, I know. He rested his hand on the console. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he spoke, not to the room but to the planet. I'm sorry. And he pressed the authorization. Across Earth, the lattice changed. Not brighter, colder, sharper. At the heat, the ancient fleet finally reacted. Every one of the silent structures turned toward the inner system, and for the first time, they powered up. On the Ithral's mercy, Sirith whispered in terror. What did humanity just unlock? Thalon watched the rising energy curve waters of magnitude beyond anything seen so far. His answer was barely audible. Not a defense system. A pause then. A retaliation protocol. And in orbit around Earth, every remaining Karnak warship suddenly experienced the same phenomenon. Their reactors shut down. All of them simultaneously. Not damaged, not overloaded, simply denied permission to produce energy across the Dominion fleet. Darkness spread. And for the first time since their arrival, the Karnak were helpless. There is a moment in every war when power stops being measured in weapons. It becomes something else. Authority. And in the Sol system, authority had just changed hands. Across the Karnak fleet, darkness fell like a verdict. Reactor cores that had burned for centuries went cold. Weapon capacitors drained themselves. Shield matrices collapsed. Thrusters sputtered into uselessness. Emergency systems flickered on, running from limited internal reserves. But the truth was already clear on every bridge. The Dominion fleet was no longer a fleet. It was debris that hadn't realized it was dead yet. On the command deck of the Iron Crown, alarms had given way to a hollow, echoing quiet. Primary core offline. Secondary ignition denied. Manual restart attempts rejected. The strategist stared at the diagnostic stream, voice barely functioning. It's not mechanical failure. Warlord Grathvek turned slowly. Then what is it? The strategist swallowed. The system is refusing the ignition command. That is not possible. The strategist forced the words out. It is treating our reactors as unauthorized energy events. Across the fleet channel, similar reports poured in. Every ship. Every power source. Denied. The Sol system itself had decided that the Karnak Dominion was no longer allowed to generate significant energy within its boundaries, and the decision was being enforced. From orbit, Earth no longer glowed like a defensive world. The atmospheric lattice had condensed into a tight, precise network. Fewer nodes, sharper lines, brighter focus. It was no longer protecting the planet, it was managing the system. Sirith stared at the data, her tendrils trembling. The energy distribution pattern. It's hierarchical now. Thalon nodded slowly. Yes, Earth isn't defending itself anymore. He watched the heliopause where the ancient fleet now burned with controlled, restrained power. Earth is the command authority. Deep beneath the surface, Director Elias Navarro stood in a chamber lit by a single pale display. Phase ASH ACT I5E. Young officer beside him spoke quietly. All Dominion vessels have lost high-energy capability. Navarro nodded. Containment, status, system-wide environmental priority locked to human custodial signature. Navarro closed his eyes for a moment. This was the part no one outside the program had ever truly understood. The Covenant of Ash was not a weapon, it was a jurisdiction transfer. Long ago, no one knew exactly when the ancient custodians had left something behind in soul. Not a fleet, not a fortress, a framework, a system designed to elevate a species to temporary environmental authority if specific conditions were met. Invasion, escalation, extinction level threat, and one more condition: willingness to carry the burden. Navarro opened his eyes. Prepare demonstration. The officer hesitated. Sir, full demonstration. Navarro's voice was quiet. They chose stellar destabilization. A pause. They need to understand the difference between power and control. Across the Dominion fleet, emergency power kept life support active. Weapons were dead, engines were dead, communication range was limited, and then space itself changed again around the Iron Crown. A faint geometric boundary appeared barely visible, like heat distortion. Inside that boundary, gravitational constants shifted by less than 1%. The effect was immediate. Structural stress rose across the ship. Metal creaked. Systems recalculated endlessly, unable to stabilize. Then the boundary contracted slightly. The stress doubled. Across the fleet, the same phenomenon began. Localized environmental compression. Not enough to destroy, enough to remind. On the Ithral's mercy, Sirith whispered in horror. They're pressure testing them. Thalan's voice was grim. They're demonstrating that the system can crush them at will. This time, the transmission did not come from a single human. It came from many faces from different nations, different languages, different uniforms, military, civilian, scientific, political. The message was unified. This is Earth. The voice carried weight, not anger, not fear. Responsibility. You entered our system with the intent to conquer. You escalated to planetary assault. You escalated to stellar threat. A pause. We are now operating under full custodial authority. Behind the speakers, the image shifted to show the Dominion fleet surrounded by faint compression boundaries. We can end every vessel you brought here. The compression fields tightened slightly. Hull strain alarms screamed across Karnak ships. Then the pressure stopped. We are choosing not to. A longer pause. You will withdraw. No threat. No anger, just certainty. On the Iron Crown, Warlord Vex stood rigid as the hull groaned around him. The strategist approached carefully. Warlord, we cannot fight. Vex claws flexed. Restart attempts all denied. External assistance none possible. The system boundary is blocking high-energy transmissions. The strategist lowered his voice. If the compression increases another 2%, structural failure becomes likely. Vex looked at the tactical display. His fleet powerless surrounded by a system that could kill them without firing a weapon for the first time in his life. Grath Vex understood what Prey felt. The Dominion channel opened. His voice was slower than before. Karnak fleet, prepare withdrawal formation. The strategist exhaled in relief. Then Vex added quietly, we will remember this system. Earth did not interfere as the Dominion ships began emergency low-power maneuvers toward the system edge. The compression fields faded. Environmental hostility dropped slightly, but the authority remained. Every Karnak system operated at reduced efficiency. Every movement was slow, every calculation unstable. They were being escorted by physics itself. At the heliopause, the ancient fleet waited. Not blocking, watching, ensuring. One by one, Dominion vessels crossed the boundary and initiated emergency slipspace. Jumps. None failed. Earth was not seeking revenge, only removal. When the last Karnak ship vanished into slipspace, the Sol system became quiet again. No weapons charged, no fleets maneuvered. Just a single inhabited world. A glowing lattice. And the silent ancient armada at the edge of the dark, across dozens of distant monitoring stations. Across the networks of every major civilization, the same data had been received. The same conclusion formed that Earth had not destroyed the Dominion fleet. Earth had dominated the environment of an entire star system. Without a battle, without a fleet, without leaving orbit. Sereth's voice shook. The galaxy is going to panic. Thalan watched Earth. A long pause. They're going to stay very, very still. Deep underground, Director Navarro looked at the energy readouts. Phase Ash was still active. The system still recognized humanity as custodian. He knew the ancient fleet was waiting, watching. Evaluating. One final decision remained. The officer beside him asked quietly, do we keep authority? Navarro looked at the planetary energy drain, at the strain, at the risk, at the weight. Then he spoke. No. He entered the command. Across the system, the lattice softened. Environmental priority dropped. The compression boundaries vanished. Energy control returned to normal physical law. At the heliopause, the ancient fleet dimmed. Then slowly, it began to withdraw back into the impossible geometry from which it had come, before the last structure faded. A single signal was sent. Not to the galaxy. Only to Earth. 3 symbols. Acknowledgement, approval, and something like relief. Then the fleet was gone. On the Ithral's mercy, Thalen watched the ancient presence vanish. Cirith whispered, "They just gave it back." "Yes, why?" Thalen looked down at Earth because the answer was clear now. They weren't guarding the weapon. A pause. They were guarding the species. Cirith turned slowly from the galaxy. Thalen shook his head. His voice was quiet. "No, from what the galaxy would become if anyone else had that power." He watched the blue world rotate peacefully again, storms moving, cities glowing, humans arguing, laughing, living at species that had just held the authority to rewrite a star system, and chosen not to keep it. But the galaxy had seen dot, and word was already spreading because the Dominion had not been destroyed. It had returned, and it was telling everyone the same thing. Do not threaten Earth, because Earth does not fight wars. Earth changes reality. In the cycles that followed the Sol incident, no war began. No fleets mobilized. No alliances shifted publicly. No official declarations were issued. And yet, across the known galaxy, something profound had changed because power had been demonstrated, and then relinquished. That combination frightened every civilization more than annihilation ever could. The Karnak Dominion did not hide its losses. It could not. 32 warships had returned with structural damage, system degradation, and data logs that defied accepted physics. 4 vessels had not returned at all. More troubling than the material losses was the strategic conclusion. The Dominion's High War Council reviewed the Sol engagement in complete silence. The final assessment contained only 3 operational directives. Sol system designated absolute exclusion zone. No Dominion military presence within 20 light-years. Human species classified. Strategic unknown. Escalation risk. Catastrophic. Warlord Grathvek spoke only once during the session. "They did not defeat us," he said. "They permitted us to leave." No one challenged the statement because every Karnak officer who had been present understood the truth. The Dominion had not been spared out of weakness. It had been spared because humanity had chosen restraint, and restraint, when backed by absolute control, was more dangerous than any weapon. In the crystalline chambers of the Valori Concord, representatives from 17-member civilizations gathered in emergency session. Senior archivist Thalen stood at the center, presenting the Sol archive. He showed them everything: the Covenant activation, the environmental authority shift, the ancient fleet. The jurisdiction transfer, the voluntary release of power. When he finished, the chamber remained silent for a full minute. Finally, a delegate from the Tith Ascendancy spoke. "You were telling us that a pre-expansion species temporarily controlled the physical priority structure of its entire system." "Yes," Thalen said, "and then relinquished it voluntarily." "Yes," the delegate hesitated. "That behavior pattern is inconsistent with known power acquisition psychology." Thalen nodded. "Yes." Another representative asked the question that mattered most. Could they do it again? Thalen did not soften the answer. "Yes, and what are the activation conditions?" "Existential threat." A long pause. Then the final question came. "Archivist Thalen, what is your recommendation?" Thalen looked at the assembled council. Then he spoke the words that would reshape galactic policy for centuries. "Do not threaten them." The change was not announced. It did not need to be. Trade routes shifted quietly away from Sol's outer region survey. Missions rerouted. Expansion proposals were amended. Military planners added a new line to their strategic models. Avoid escalation near human space. Even species that did not believe the reports noticed something strange. No one was testing Earth. No pirates, no prospectors, no opportunists. The galaxy had done what intelligent ecosystems always do after encountering a predator it cannot understand. It became very quiet. On Earth, the official story was simple. An extraterrestrial force had attempted invasion. Humanity had repelled it using experimental planetary defense technologies. The details remained classified. Most of the world returned to its ordinary concerns within weeks. Economies recovered, governments argued. Social media moved on, but not everyone forgot. In a secure facility beneath the United Earth Emergency Council headquarters, Director Elias Navarro delivered his final report. "The Covenant remains dormant," he said. "Reactivation threshold unchanged." A council member asked quietly, "How long can we keep this secret?" Navarro shook his head. "We're not keeping it secret, we're keeping it unused." The Covenant of Ash had never been meant as a weapon of conquest. That much was clear now. Its architecture required something specific to function. Properly distributed authority. Internal conflict without systemic collapse. A species capable of cooperation without losing diversity. Humanity's greatest weaknesses, argument, ideological friction, were also the stabilizing factors that prevented any single group from seizing permanent control of the system. The ancient custodians had not chosen the strongest species. They had chosen the one least likely to unify around domination, the one that would hesitate, the one that would argue, the one that would doubt itself, because a species that doubted its right to rule was the safest possible holder of absolute authority. 3 years after the Sol incident, the Valori Concord authorized a limited diplomatic observation mission. Not contact. Not alliance. Observation. Senior Archivist Thalen volunteered. From orbit, Earth looked unchanged. Clouds drifted, cities glowed. Storms move. No planetary shield, no visible superweapons, just a noisy, messy living world. Thalon was granted a controlled communication window with a human representative. The connection stabilized. On the screen appeared a middle-aged woman in civilian clothing, not a general. Not a political leader. A systems engineer. Dr. Lila Mendes. Thalon inclined his head. Your species demonstrated capabilities that would place you among the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. Mendes smiled faintly. We demonstrated what happens when we're scared enough. Thalon studied her. Why did you relinquish the authority? Mendes didn't answer immediately. Instead, she asked Archivist Thalon, how many wars has your civilization fought? 42 major conflicts in our recorded history. And how many of those were started because someone believed they could control the outcome? Thalon paused. Most of them. Mendes nodded. That's why we gave it back. She leaned forward slightly. Power you can turn on whenever you want is dangerous. Power you only get when you're desperate is a safety system. Thalon considered that. Then he asked the question that had troubled him since the incident. Are you afraid of the galaxy? Mendes shook her head. No. A small pause. But the galaxy should probably be a little afraid of what happens if it pushes us too far. No official declaration ever came from Earth, but over time, a quiet understanding circulated through diplomatic channels, trade negotiations, and military briefings. It was never written as policy, never broadcast as a warning. It existed as a simple strategic assumption. Humans prefer cooperation. Humans prefer negotiation. Humans prefer negotiation. Humans prefer peace, but if you threaten their survival, they will change the rules of reality. In the Grand Archive, Thalon updated the Cell 3 classification. The old designation read Black Mirror World, External Guardianship suspected. He replaced it with a new one, Custodial World, Guardianship confirmed, and beneath it, a note for future archivists. This species was given the authority to reshape its environment at a system scale. It shows restraint. This behavior indicates extreme long-term stability. Then, after a long moment of thought, he added one more line. Do not mistake their restraint for weakness. Centuries later, historians would refer to the period that followed as the quiet expansion. No major wars, few territorial conflicts, diplomatic solutions favored over military ones, not because civilizations had suddenly become wiser, but because somewhere in the Orion arm existed a species that had demonstrated something terrifying. They did not conquer. They did not dominate. They did not even threaten. They simply proved that, if pushed far enough, they could. On a small hill overlooking a coastal city, a young human child pointed up at the night sky. Are there aliens out there? She asked her father. He looked at the stars. Yet, he said. Are they dangerous? He thought about the classified briefings. He'd never be allowed to discuss. Then he smiled. Only if they make bad decisions. The child nodded, satisfied, and went back to watching the waves. Above them, satellites orbited quietly, hidden deep beneath the planet. Systems slept at the edge of the solar system. An impossible geometry drifted just outside normal space. Watching, waiting, not guarding a weapon, guarding a weapon. Guarding a choice, because the true power of humanity was never the covenant, never the lattice. Never the authority over physics. It was this, given absolute power over a star system. Humanity had chosen mercy, and that was why. Across the galaxy, when Earth finally retaliated, everyone stood very, very still. End of story.